With each decision, with each new unveiling of information, seemingly every day, we get a clearer picture of what it will look like with USC in the Big Ten on the field against the oldest conference in college football. Welcome into USC Trojans Live right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Please bring a friend or two or 50 with you. Go grab them while we're still early in the process right here. Let them know that we're talking USC football as we do each and every week with, of course, our friend Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Matt, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Mark. How are you?
I am doing just fine. And wow, uh, aside from the actual games on the field, what most interests me from a content creator standpoint is these type of situations. The way the sport is structured is fascinating to me. Both the mistakes that have been made, the innovations that have been made, the good, the bad, taking apart the sport from a structural and historical standpoint, and then looking forward and projecting into the future about what it will mean, who it will benefit, who it will hurt in regards to their competitive balance. I know that you've attacked that on Trojans Wire. And so, uh, again, catch Matt's work on Trojans Wire. But in regards to your thought process about the way the Big Ten attended to USC in particular.
So, I think USC fans, first off, I think USC fans are very happy with this arrangement. But I would say that nationally, the response to this schedule and really the formatting, the structure, it's not so much like who plays whom, but just what was the format going to be? That was really the huge overall talking point. And I think national response has been very good. And I think it's positive because, first off, with USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, that is a geographical game changer, as you well know. It changes the paradigm. It's really a next step crossing the Rubicon in terms of just blowing up normal geographical considerations and our normal expectations. So this so-called Flex Protect Plus plan by the Big Ten, it's meant to not overburden schools in terms of travel. And so the specific concept here is, a lot of us thought that it was very possible that we'd have the 3-6-6 plan, that you'd play 6 rotating schools each year. That would be 12 of the 15 you'd play in a 16-team conference, and you'd have 3 fixed opponents every year. I mean, it seemed reasonable enough because that's pretty clean and neat. You can just slice it up pretty evenly. That would have been the easy way. The Big Ten wanted to make it a little more complicated, but the complexity is actually serving the full membership of the conference. So a couple representative examples here. In terms of the travel, USC has just one protected game and annual game, and that's UCLA. UCLA has just one protected game. That's USC. Why did the Big Ten do that? You don't want to lock in Nebraska or Iowa. A couple of the logical candidates that people thought, oh, if USC is going to have 3 fixed opponents, Iowa and Nebraska, on the western side of the main Big Ten geographical footprint, those would probably be the regular playing partners for USC in a 3-6-6 plan had the Big Ten chosen to go that way. Why did the Big Ten not do it? You don't want to force Nebraska and Iowa to have those trips to LA every year or maybe twice a season. You don't want to put the unique burden on those Big Ten schools to have to fly out to LA regularly. By having USC play only UCLA as its one guaranteed permanent game, you are putting in flexibility. You are putting in some elasticity, and you can mix and match and move around the pieces much more freely. So that's one concept in terms of the travel to and from Los Angeles. But the other key piece, and I talked to my partners at Hawkeyes Wire, the other college wire site, part of the Big Ten family. I talked to Hawkeyes Wire before this schedule release, and I asked, what do Iowa fans want? And the editor of Hawkeyes Wire, his name is Josh Helmer, he told me that we just want to be able to play Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Minnesota every year. We want those 3 rivalry games every year. We want Cornageddon on Black Friday, and then we want Floyd of Rosedale, and then we want to take on those Badgers. We want those 3 games every year. Big Ten gave Iowa those 3 games. So the Big Ten was tending to Iowa's wants and desires as a fan base, but then Penn State, no protected games. And Maryland and Rutgers, they only have each other as their protected game. And Maryland and Rutgers have to be happy. They don't have to play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan every year. They're going to get breaks there. So you can really see by not insisting on 3 protected opponents for every school throughout the conference, you are serving your full membership. You're not just catering to Ohio State, Michigan. This really serves a lot of different interests from a lot of different vantage points, and that's why it's being well received, because people can really see the Big Ten is trying to help everybody. It's trying to give something to everyone in this schedule. Now, there's inevitably a loser in this, but it's not as though the Big Ten went out of its way to do this, but with the move to a division-free setting, a division-free format, those schools in the Big Ten West, thinking about Illinois and Northwestern in particular, they both have to play Ohio State in 2024 and 2025. Those are losers, but you are inevitably going to get Big Ten West programs moving to a divisionless format that we're going to get that kind of short end of the stick. Oh, you're going to have to play Ohio State and Michigan more often than you have been, but that was unavoidable. There's certain things that were avoidable, certain things not. That was unavoidable. That Big Ten West teams, well, you don't get to just play Purdue and Minnesota and Northwestern and Nebraska. No, you're going to have to play those Eastern schools a little bit more often. But really, when you look at trying to satisfy a 16-school constituency, this Flex Protect Plus plan, by not locking in 3 permanent annual games for everyone, you can see the wisdom of that. And I think a lot of people, including USC fans, really do appreciate that. So I think you can see how this works for the Marylands and the Rutgers, formerly in the Big Ten East. Now they get to breathe at least a little bit. And you can also see how you don't want to have the Nebraskas, Iowas, those on the western geographical edge of the normal Big Ten footprint. We're not going to force you to travel to Los Angeles all the time. No, we're going to spread that out, and we're not going to lock in too many commitments, too many plane flights to and from LA. I think people can see how balanced and reasonable this project really is.
There are so many considerations to make because I think most fans, and it's understandable, they, of course, are hyper-focused on their particular team and their wants and desires, which involve rivals or involve wanting to play a really good schedule or wanting to play an extremely weak schedule and that sort of thing. But you got to take all this into consideration because it's easy, to your initial point, that the Big Ten did, again, it's been a conference that's been so steeped in tradition and going by the book and doing things old school ways, and it's worked well. Hey, they've gotten to this point as arguably the conference with the most power and authority in the sport. However, there in recent times here, the last several major decisions they've been able to hold with tradition while projecting into the future, updating the sport, updating the approach. And to your point, they could have just cookie cutter, we're done with it, there it is. But they took all these things into consideration because it's easy to think in a linear standpoint and think, okay, biggest objective is rivalries. We got to protect rivalries and then forget all these other factors. Or we want a equitable schedule. And that's a good point. That's certainly something to achieve, an equitable schedule. That's something that I've focused on as I've tried to craft schedules and scheduling formats, it being an equitable schedule. The obvious network portion of this, as a network television partner and media partner, is to get the best matchups out there. And then you bring into it the travel portion of this, which, because of the dynamics of college football in the past and being so regionally focused, wasn't really an issue that had to be dealt with. Now, when you're stretching from coast to coast, that dynamic has to be taken into consideration. So when you put all of those factors together, it becomes quite complex of a a scenario to put together, where you're not just building a haphazard schedule each and every season. You have to have some kind of continuity or formula to it that repeats itself to a certain extent. But they put these 2-year cycles together, and I'm extremely impressed by what they were able to do.
Yeah, you really hit on an important point at the end there, which I didn't talk about in the intro, and that is these are 2-year cycles. These are 2-year chunks, and so like you can look at how a system operates in 2 years, and then you can start fresh and do another 2-year grid, and so that way, the Big Ten is in a position to look at 2 years of play and then do something different in those 2 years, and again, not having permanent opponents. So like it will have the roadmap based on 2024 and 2025. It will then be able to create something entirely fresh for 2026 and 2027. And yet, like there's a knowledge and an awareness of certain things that are going to happen in 2026 and 2027, right? Because USC hosts Michigan in 24, goes to Ohio State in 25. So you know that in that next 2-year cycle, 26 and 27, USC will, in one of those 2 years, go to Ann Arbor, and Ohio State will go to the Coliseum in one of those 2 years. But like, it's not as though it has to be in 26 or it has to be in 27. Big Ten can play around. And like, like that makes sense, right? Because what if Luke Fickell and Wisconsin take off? Then where and how you slot that next Wisconsin USC game or that next Wisconsin Michigan game, you can tinker with it in terms of where you place it, when they play in that next 26-27 cycle. And conversely, like if Matt Rule in Nebraska face plant, then you're not going to give Nebraska, the ultimate schedule, or you're not going to handle Nebraska in a certain way in 2026. You can maybe wait and see. Maybe if Matt Rule, just hypothetically, if they have a rough 2024 and 25, maybe you give Nebraska a gentler schedule in 26, and then maybe you give Nebraska more showcases in 2027. So like this 2-year cycle thing, like you can let games play out, certainly in 2024 at the very least, before you really make final decisions in 2025 about the 2026-2027 2-year cycle. So the Big Ten is building in flexibility, and it's great. And like, Mark, me, I'm Mr. Flex guy. Like, I believe more flex scheduling, more, not locking in long-term commitments, but allowing for contingencies. We need to have more of that in college football, not less. So I am really sold on the Big Ten's thought process. And I'm very, very impressed by how they really thought this through. And again, I would just emphasize this paradox. The Big Ten could have made a very easy schedule, 3-6-6, slice and dice. You can just distribute the 3 equal, protected, locked in games every year. Wouldn't have taken that much effort. But by being a little bit more complicated, the conference actually created flexibility. Like, that is a paradox, and it's something for other conferences, SEC, to take into consideration.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I was thinking that entire time, SEC, ACC, they have built a model with a 14-team league with 2 7-team divisions that were basically based on geography. On the SEC side, on the AC side, it's just kind of this haphazard, let's try to balance these things out. There's no geographic sense to it, and that's fine. And then these placeholder rivalries that because that certain teams that play in separate divisions are true rivals and need to play each other, that we have to match up these artificial rivalries like South Carolina and Texas A&M that have nothing to do with each other,
Yeah.
and Virginia Tech and Boston College that have not. It's just a very cookie cutter linear, with only thinking, okay, about basically protecting rivals, and that we have to have the same number of teams in two divisions is pretty much almost the extent of I know it's a little more complicated than that, but not a whole lot. Whereas I think, Matt, the Big Ten has again taken from the NFL in a sense, where there is a structure. Okay, you play everyone in your division, you play a separate division that rotates in the other conference, but the rest of the roughly for half of the schedule is nuanced based on the competitive balance. And the representative from the Big Ten made the statement, this 2-year process is based on responding to competitive trends.
Yeah, it really shines through.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Appreciate Matt being here every week. We've done this 56 consecutive weeks. Check out Matt's work at Trojans Wire.
There's another point to be made about all this, that the Big Ten protected 11 games. 11 games are going to be annual games. And if you look at the vast majority of those games, like Purdue, Indiana, Illinois, Northwestern, Iowa, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, most of those games, USC, UCLA, Michigan, Ohio State, what do they all have in common? Not just that they're rivalries. That's obviously one part of it, but short commutes. Like, those locked-in games are short commute games. So when you do ask Big Ten teams to go to Los Angeles, and when you do ask USC and UCLA to make all those trips to the Eastern time zone, to the eastern edge of the Central time zone, having the fixed games, the locked-in automatic games, be short commute games, you are getting into balance in terms of the strain of travel, the overall amount of miles teams will travel. See, that is just so wise. And you brought up specifically from the SEC, South Carolina, Texas A&M. So Columbia to College Station, that's a commute. That's a long commute. And of course, in the Big 12, like, we have West Virginia, Texas Tech. And we have other very, very long distance commutes. Think of the AAC with Navy and Temple going down to South Florida, or SMU or Tulsa. And so, in terms of the games that should always be played, they're short commute games, and it's not just due to the rivalry factor. It's due to the fact that it's minimal travel, and it's going to be able to save the strain on these athletes, which has to be built into the equation for all sports, not just football, that the new 16-team Big Ten has to account for.
Yes, not just a long commute, but a senseless long commute. If Notre Dame was in the Big Ten and the Big Ten was going to protect Notre Dame and USC, absolutely, then they would have to bring in some other nuances, because there would be a reason to protect that. The only game out of those 11 that I didn't understand, if I remember correctly, Purdue and Illinois. I didn't know that was a rivalry, except for them playing in the same division and playing in the Big Ten for a long, long time. That was the only heads
that got picked because it's a short commute. Like, it's not by accident. Like, it's a short commute game.
But and also Mark, rivalries.
It's not a rivalry. But when you think about it, I mentioned earlier that, like, Purdue and Illinois, those are losers in a larger sense, because they now have to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State more often. So locking in a game against each other, giving each team a more winnable game, that's throwing them a bone. So that even then, the Big Ten is creating a little bit of balance. Like, in terms of the politics, like, that is why you would lock in that game. In addition to the short commute factor, you're throwing those two programs a bone. You're giving them a winnable game, since they're going to have to play the Buckeyes, Wolverines, and Nittany Lions more often.
So are we understanding that those 11 protected are for just these 2 years? Or
no, long term? Those are long term.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't make sense.
Because they're. And so here's a nuance that just to clear this up for anyone who's confused. So there are 11 protected games. That's long term. So it's going to exist in the 2024, 2025 2-year cycle, the 2026, 27 cycle, 28, 29. Like those are long term deals. All right. But in 2024 and 2025, every Big Ten team will have what the Big Ten calls two play opponents. So teams that they will play in 2024 and 2025. All right. USC's 3 opponents in both the 2024 and 25 seasons are UCLA and also Penn State and Wisconsin. But Penn State and Wisconsin, they are not going to be permanent, long-term annual opponents for USC. That's going to turn over. USC will play a couple other teams in both 26 and 27, but only UCLA is the protected long-term opponent for USC. Penn State and Wisconsin are just a part of the 2024-2025 bundle. So there's a distinction to be made between the 2024-2025 cycle, the 3 teams every Big Ten team will play in that 2-year grid, and on the other hand, the long-term opponents. So we need to be very clear about that. The common opponents, what the Big Ten calls 2-play opponents for 24-25, that's different from the long-term protected games. There are only 11 specific matchups. And hey, we have those 11 matchups at Trojans Wire, and we also have the 2-play opponents at Trojans Wire. You can get all of these categorical breakdowns at our site. We're covering all the various nuances of this. So like if you're confused, head on over to Trojans Wire. We lay it all out. Spend a half hour at our site. Look at all the stories. Look at all the nuances. We have you covered here.
Absolutely. Always check out Matt's work at Trojans Wire. Also, I posted a video about a month ago that looked at USC's recent history against the Big Ten and projected USC's success possibilities against the Big Ten. Our buddy here, Jeff Rodriguez, is saying the Big Ten is a perfect fit for SC. We've been playing Notre Dame in Indiana every 2 years, loads of big-time road games, and a winning Rose Bowl record against everyone in the Big Ten. Big Ten better fans. Just more fans, that's for sure.
Oh, and hey, Jeff, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, let's step back and realize that like just USC's schedule upgrade is conspicuous because in 2024, USC is playing LSU, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State. In 2025, USC plays Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Ohio State. The opponents just jump off the page. And the thing about this is that, in a 12-team playoff, which we are going to have in 2024 when USC joins the Big Ten, with a 2024 schedule that has Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, Notre Dame, LSU, we can say this pretty clearly and pretty confidently. If USC goes 10-2 against that schedule, no debate, no question, USC is not going to be sweating bullets with 12 slots, all those at-large bids. If USC goes 10-2, USC can lose twice, but if it loses twice, that means it will have beaten at least 3 of the 5: LSU, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State. Like guaranteed. We had this discussion last year when Alabama went 10-2. Alabama went 10-2 against a schedule much less impressive than what USC is going to face in 2024. And yet, of course, if we had 12 teams last year, there's zero question that Alabama would have gotten into a 12-team playoff. So the schedule is going to be daunting, but it's so sexy, and you're going to have so many spotlight games on the USC schedule that if USC can regularly hit the 10-win mark, go 10-2, going to be in like Flynn, and we're going to see regular playoff appearances for USC. So that gives USC some real margin for error. You can lose twice and yet still be fairly comfortably in the playoff. That is what the Big Ten is adding to the mix for Lincoln Riley and USC.
Folks, we've talked about it many times on here and on our other channels and platforms here at the Voice of College Football. Do I enjoy and overall do I like what's going on in college football with the tearing away of the regionality. No, I don't. I would love for us to rewind
Same.
decades and go back to the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, maybe even. But anyway, and go back to and have Maryland and Rutgers play in a Big East or an ACC, as it were, with, of course, Maryland and all of that. Yes, but these matchups.
That's right. And not just the matchups themselves, like the schools, but also, the history this is going to create. Because as people have noted in the chat, that Michigan's played in the Coliseum once. Michigan's played in the Los Angeles Coliseum one time, 1957. And, Ohio State coming out to Los Angeles, that's usually for a Rose Bowl game, but now it's going to be in the regular season. You're going to have so many historically fresh occurrences. And think of the coaching matchups we're going to have. We're going to have Lincoln Riley against Jim Harbaugh. We're going to have Lincoln Riley against Luke Fickell. Lincoln Riley against James Franklin. And of course, I mean, out of conference, Lincoln Riley against Brian Kelly and LSU. But like that's non-con. But gosh, the coaching matchups you're going to have in just strictly within the Big Ten. And I mean, like the Pac-12 has some really good up-and-coming coaches such as Kalen DeBoer at Washington, Kyle Whittingham at Utah is great, but Harbaugh against Lincoln in the Coliseum, I mean, that's taking it to a whole nother level. Like you're really getting into, John McKay and Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes from the 70s. I mean, you're getting into the heavyweight class right there with these matchups. So yeah, like Mark, I'm right with you as a college football traditionalist. I would love to live in a 1985 world with two changes. One, we have a +1 after the Bulls. And second, we have 2020 level TV coverage and, transplanting that back to 1985. You just give me a 1985 college football world, but with more, modern level TV coverage and visibility and a +1 after the Bulls. Oh, chef's kiss. That would be perfection. But since we can't have 1985, wow, these are just some amazingly attractive matchups, and you can't deny that, even if you are a college football traditionalist. So Michigan, USC, primetime, we know that's going to be a primetime NBC game in LA, probably late October, maybe early November. Oh, wow, that is just going to rock so much.
Folks, we've got USC channel YouTube memberships available right here at the Voice of College Football. So what you get there is exclusive content. Matt and I have already produced 5 exclusive segments that have been enjoyed by many, and we will note our loyal members here at the Voice of College Football here in just a second. And we are continuing to produce more, some related to this situation, some related to some other interesting topics that both Matt and I have determined to go forward with here. So really good content. People have enjoyed the exclusive delivery.
I'm not going to give the spoiler, Mark, but this next topic we're going to have in our newest bonus cut, which is going to be released later this week at the Voice of College Football, this new bonus segment that you can watch if you become a membership at the medium or top tier. This next topic, you are going to love it. But this is why you need to become a member. We're giving you the really prime select cuts on these bonus segments. This next topic, you're going to love it. Trust me.
Every time Matt serves up a topic, I usually say, sounds good. We'll do it. Really good one. This one, I was like, wow, I like that one. I love that one. Let's dive into that one. That is an interesting one right there.
And you are a Big Ten expert, like you're a college football expert, but the Big Ten is your wheelhouse. So I needed to serve this up for you.
I hope I'm up to the challenge coming off vacation, because Matt came up with a really good one. Yes, he did.
So you want to watch that.
We certainly want to recognize we've got Gixxer Squid, we've got LBC Rob, we've got Jason Bernardino, we've got Cole, Little Peep, Joey Foster, and William and Hal. All of you are YouTube members. We thank you so much for your contributions here at the Voice of College Football.
Thank you, guys. And hey, if you watch those bonus segments, give us some feedback on them. And if you have ideas for your own bonus segments that you'd like Mark and I to kick around, by all means, bring those suggestions to us. We want to give you what you crave here at the Voice of College Football.
We're going to find out a little bit later in this formula, Matt, what the tie-breaking system is going to be, which is crucial because, folks, do the math here. The larger the conference, the more likelihood the two teams will not play each other and will tie for either. There could be a three-way tie for first place. There could be a two-way tie or a three-way tie for second place. Top two teams, no divisions, top two record play in the championship games. But if there is a tie, then we go from there. Obviously, if the two teams played, it's an easy tiebreaker on the field. But many times these teams involved in a tiebreaker will not have played during the regular season.
We all remember the 2010 Big Ten season when you had a three-way tie and you didn't have common opponents in all three. And that was an absolute train wreck.
Good call. Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Ohio State in 2010, all at 7-1 in the conference.
And of course, maybe the most painful instance of an unresolved Big Ten tie, 2002, when Iowa and Ohio State both went unbeaten in the conference and never got to play each other. Oh, if we had a Big Ten title game back then, that would have been a year to really have a conference championship game, but the Big Ten hadn't gotten around to it.
So this is possibly, depending on, again, the situation, unlike what we would see currently in the Big 12, where if two teams tied for a conference championship game spot, they will have played up until this season. Now they are moving into this area as well, with 16 or 14 teams in the league going forward in the Big 12 starting in 2023.
I want to bring this up from Jeffrey Thompson. Will the Big Ten Conference Championship game be in the Rose Bowl? No, it's going to be in Indianapolis, but Jeffrey should make you Big Ten commissioner based on this comment, because it should be, right?
It needs to be moved around at least.
At least, yes. But Jeffrey, if you ruled the world, I wish, your idea would come true, because it's such a natural thing.
You would play it at the Rose Bowl every year?
No, I wouldn't. But
I'd move it around.
I think I would say you put it at the Rose Bowl every other year, and you put it at an Eastern location in the other years. I think that would be the easiest way to do it.
Never at the Coliseum.
No.
Okay.
Because UCLA is not going to be in that game, for one thing. But the other thing is, and this is something that we've had fun with at Trojan Conquest Live with Tim Prangley and Rick Anaya every Sunday at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific at the Voice of College Football. We bust UCLA's chops on Trojan Conquest Live, and one thing we've noted is that UCLA can't keep the tarps on forever. Those tarps are going to have to go. You're going to have to let those Nebraskans and those Ohioans and those Michiganders into the Rose Bowl Stadium, because you need that money, and you're subsidizing Cal Berkeley. You kept the tarps on for USC. There's no hiding. You cannot permanently do that. You're going to have to take those tarps off. Let those Midwesterners buy those tickets for UCLA football. UCLA is going to play a lot of road games going forward these next several years, if you know what I mean.
Well, it makes me think that maybe we should start a UCLA channel here at the Voice of College Football and give them some equal time. I just want to make sure that somebody's going to show up for it. That's
oh.
So
certainly late August.
Hummus Hero makes a good point here. Yeah. That this is all controlled climate, UCLA fans, so that no worries. You don't have to watch these shows like in 95-degree heat and make that excuse. Okay. So Hummus Hero, we understand you can't make it a potential home game arguing against, but I'm scratching my head, man. I think that this has happened before
in the Rose Bowl game. just like several dozen times. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like it's not as though the Big Ten fan base won't travel. That's the other thing. Like, USC, Ohio State in the Rose Bowl in the 1970s. It's not as though the Trojans were dominating the crowd. You have plenty of visitors from the Midwest, and that's part of the game's charm.
To Rick's point here, LBC Trojan, UCLA needs to pay USC a finder's fee.
And so, got to take the tarps off, Bruins.
Well, we do appreciate everybody being here, the Voice of College Football. Consider what we deliver here with Matt's help every Monday night. It's at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. And what another edition by these guys. Looking at Tim and Rick, where they deliver the Trojan Conquest live show each and every Sunday night. Anthony Munoz, again, if you've missed it, have not taken it in, it's an evergreen bit of content that you can watch 5 years from now, and you're still going to gain so much from listening to Anthony Munoz. So check that out. And now they're doing a call-in show that they've tacked on.
And hey, guys, if you haven't watched the Anthony Munoz 1-hour conversation with Tim and Rick on Trojan Conquest Live from a week ago, what are you waiting for? Get on over there. And again, no spoilers in terms of like the contents of stories, but Anthony Munoz tells stories about Woody Hayes, Juan Marichal, the great San Francisco Giant pitcher from the 1960s. Tells stories about his injuries and being picked third by the Cincinnati Bengals in the 1980 NFL draft. Charles White, the 1980 Rose Bowl, on and on and on. He talks about his childhood, about his faith, about his NFL journey, just everything. It's pure gold. It's pure gold. Tim and Rick did an absolutely fantastic job. Munoz also talks about his foundation work and his outreach. Like there's something for everyone. Like you don't have to be a USC fan. I could even say you don't even need to be a football fan. Like this is just a great human interest interview. If that's your kind of thing, or if members of your family would say, oh, what's in it for me? What could I get out of that? I don't like football. Trust me, there's something in it for everyone. And so you really need to watch what Tim and Rick did with Anthony Munoz. It's just a tremendous interview. And I don't say that just because Trojan Conquest Live is part of the family here at the Voice of College Football. Objectively, it was a great interview. I talk to Tim and Rick all the time off the air when we're not doing these shows, when I'm not appearing on their broadcast. And one thing I said to them is that, one of my idols in broadcasting, like Vince Scully's my ultimate hero, but another broadcaster I always looked up to growing up as a kid in the 1980s and 90s was Pat Summerall. And what do we remember about Pat Summerall? He would get out of the way. He'd let John Madden talk. And when there was a big play, he'd just let the roar of the crowd and the television images tell the story. In Super Bowl 21, just Bavaro, touchdown. And then for 20 seconds, it would just be the roar of the crowd. And that was perfect. Summerall was the perfect TV voice for football because it's an image-driven medium. He let the images tell the story, and he'd let John Madden fill in the blanks. That's what Tim and Rick did with Anthony Munoz. They got out of the way. They knew that Anthony Munoz was the star of the show. They just let Anthony Munoz tell his stories, professionally. Just, I'm a journalism major, and I offer a lot of media criticism in my line of work. That was legitimately a great professional interview by Tim and Rick. So it's not just great content, but the two of them did a great job getting out of the way, letting the star of the show tell his stories. Again, you got to watch it. You got to share it. And you got to subscribe to the Trojan Conquest Live at the Voice of College Football to support Tim and Rick in their work and to tell them just how good a job they're doing. They're hitting a home run.
We've made it easy for you. Extra easy, folks. I dropped the link right there in the chat. So all you have to do is just click on the link. It's right there to follow us to the Anthony Munoz interview. And again, for example, folks, I interviewed Neil Brown, West Virginia head coach. I know you don't care about Neil Brown, but this is just an example of what we're, attempting to do and what we're venturing out to do. And we are in contact with a few other headline type head coaches out there to get those type of interviews. Again, Rick and Tim doing a tremendous job. Anthony Munoz and the guys did a great job with the Pac-12 and the USC shows this past fall. Getting the Washington State chancellor and the tree from Stanford and all these interviews. And so just keep in mind, folks, that before we are able to deliver these types of interviews, and if I would drop a few names, I won't, of the guys, the coaches that we're pursuing. And when I'm talking about pursuing, I'm not just saying that we're throwing out, blind Twitter feeds. No, we're actually having conversations and trying to organize schedules. Again, please just support us here because we're doing our best to deliver the very best on all the platforms at the Voice of College Football, but specifically thanks to Matt and thanks to Tim and thanks to Rick and to Tony as well here on the USC channel in particular. All right, Matt, let's see. Where do we go from here?
Well, just anyone up for some trivia, some college football and football trivia on a Monday night.
I am.
Okay, because we've been doing these things at Trojans Wire with the move to the Big Ten, and just Ohio State and Michigan are going to be a greater part of our lives. So here's a classic sports trivia question with a strong college football component, and definitely a USC component, which also touches on Michigan and Ohio State. So who are the two football coaches who have won the Super Bowl and the Rose Bowl? Only two. Now, Pete Carroll's one. So
Okay.
everyone knows that, and this is a USC program. So I don't have to waste anyone's time with that one. But who's the other one?
Well, I'm not going to blurt it out because we're going to let our folks here.
Yes. So we wrote about this at Trojans Wire. You could look it up, but let's see if anyone can just get it off the top of the head. And, Pete Carroll is the only coach who's won the Super Bowl, the national championship, and the Rose Bowl. Only one to do that. Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer, they've won the national championship and the Super Bowl. Okay. But only one coach other than Pete Carroll has won the Super Bowl and the Rose Bowl.
Do we know who, if any, coaches have won all 4 major bowl games?
Yes, probably Paterno.
Yeah, Paterno's.
Probably. Don't know that for a fact, but probably, because he did make them all. He won the Fiesta. He won the Cotton.
He won the Sugar.
He won the Sugar, and I think he won the Orange at some point.
Yeah, he did in the early 70s.
Yeah.
73.
So there you go. I don't know if someone else here. Someone got it. If you want to highlight it.
Bam.
There you go.
Well done.
There you go. So
UCLA, Ohio State, 1976.
That's right. Dick Vermeil coached at UCLA for just 2 years, 74 and 75. He beat Woody Hayes in Ohio State and Archie Griffin. That was Archie Griffin's last game as an Ohio State Buckeye, as the 2-time Heisman Trophy winner in 1976. And then, of course, the Super Bowl 34 in Atlanta, the Mike Jones tackle of Kevin Dyson of the Tennessee Titans at the 1-yard line. So Dick Vermeil, the one coach other than Pete Carroll to win the Rose Bowl and the Super Bowl. One of the great classic sports trivia questions you can come up with.
I got to say, Matt, if we could get you on here for some other show and we could get some kind of support for it, my goodness, we could do trivia night or something. And of course you would shine and I would try to keep up. But you just reminded me of a situation that I encountered at ESPN. I was on the interview team for production operations. We're interviewing a candidate. He was a little verbose in his knowledge or purported knowledge of sports and the NFL in particular. He stated a number of times during the interview, I know more about the NFL than anyone. So near the end of the interview, I said, okay, so you've mentioned that you're extremely knowledgeable on the NFL. What if I asked you a question and said, your employment at ESPN rides on the correct answer to this question? Would you be willing to put your possible employment on the line? And he said, sure. And what brought that to mind is the last play of that Super Bowl, because I said, can you tell me in the 2000 Super Bowl who threw the final pass, who made the catch, and who made the tackle? And he got the first two legs, but did not come up with the Mike Jones tackle at the goal line, at the 1 yard line.
You know, when people say, I know everything, that's a little bit of a warning sign.
None of us know everything. So,
well, the other thing is, like, if you have to say it, you know, before you prove it, you know, like that's a flashing red light right there. Other fun little tidbits that, you know, like I've been researching USC, UCLA, Michigan, Ohio State, you know, now that we're all going to be conference buddies, you know, like a few things that snuck under the radar. One, Michigan has played a football game in the Los Angeles Coliseum against a non-USC opponent. Anyone know the year when that happened? That's a trivia question.
It wasn't a bowl game.
It was not a bowl game, because Coliseum doesn't host bowl games. It wasn't a Rose Bowl. But this goes into a knowledge of the history of another team in Los Angeles. Let's put it that way.
And this is before our time, correct?
Not that. Well, let's put it this way: not that much before our time.
Really?
Yeah. It's not like pre-World War II, and it's not even pre-Vietnam War era. Let's put it that way. All right. So this is part of it. That's correct. Because if you remember, UCLA and USC were shared tenants of the Los Angeles Coliseum through 1981 before UCLA moved to the Rose Bowl Stadium in 1982. So that's part of it. But then when did it happen? Don't need to drag this out too much. Let's give another like 15 seconds or so. Yeah, so UCLA used to play its home games regularly in the Coliseum. That was a shared home field. So it's not as though UCLA playing USC in the Coliseum was a road game for UCLA. It was not. It was a shared home game. It was a true neutral site game. All right. I think time's up. 1972. Michigan beat UCLA 26-9 in 1972. And worth noting that Ohio State played UCLA in the Coliseum in 1979. And so that leads to an interesting fact that in that 1979 Ohio State UCLA game in the Coliseum, what happened? I mean, Ohio State beat UCLA, but Pete Carroll was on that 1979 Ohio State staff under Earl Bruce. Carroll was under Earl Bruce at Iowa State in 1978. Bruce took Carroll with him to Columbus in 1979 after Woody Hayes got fired following his punch of the Clemson linebacker in the 1978 Gator Bowl. So technically, and I noted this at Trojans Wire over the weekend, Pete Carroll beat UCLA in the Coliseum 22 years before his first game at USC in 2001. He did it in 1979 as an Ohio State assistant. So many of those fun little nuggets from all the Big Ten research that I've been doing over the past several days at Trojans Wire.
Another connection that could be made from that game to USC would be that was a pivotal moment in Ohio State's season, coming off a disappointing season in Woody Hayes' final campaign there in Columbus, 7-4-1, punched the Clemson linebacker Charlie Ballman, and then Earl Bruce takes over. It was only the second game of the season. Ohio State was unranked. They had to march down the field in the closing minute. A seldom used fullback, Paul Campbell, caught the game-winning touchdown pass from Art Schlechter that led to a 17-13 victory. Ohio State wins 11 in a row, and of course, that sets up the matchup against USC as a number one team in the country, 17-16, Charles White and USC at the Rose Bowl. Now, many people may know that are watching right now that Michigan and USC played in back-to-back Rose Bowls at the end of Bo Schembechler's tenure at Michigan. And Bo won one of just 2 Rose Bowls against USC following the 1988 season, and then closed out his career with a loss to USC at the Rose Bowl in 1989. However, what 2 teams involved in this dynamic of USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten played one of the major powers from the Big Ten in back-to-back different bowl games during the 1980s? One game that I know Matt knows this bowl game, but very few out there, I believe, are probably aware of this long since defunct bowl game that featured 2 marquee brands. Are you with me on this one?
I know the answer. I know
played
the answer.
at an NFL stadium, one of the 8 wonders of the world.
Yep.
So do you guys have the new member of the Big Ten facing an old guard from the Big Ten, back-to-back bowl games during the 1980s? One would be a traditional Rose Bowl game. So that was
Tim Prangley knows it.
So you got it?
Oh,
yes. Very nice.
Identified the bowl game.
So if I remember scores correctly, which I typically do, Michigan routed UCLA 33-14 in the Blue Bonnet Bowl in Houston following the 1981 season. Then Tom Ramsey and UCLA came back for the Big Bowl win in the Rose Bowl 24-14 against Michigan. A game that irked me because as an Ohio State fan, the Buckeyes beat Michigan head-to-head, but due to a scheduling quirk, Michigan won the Big Ten at 8-1. Ohio State was 7-1, and they beat Michigan head-to-head, but did not go to the Rose Bowl.
Now, how did that scheduling imbalance happen?
That happened a number of times that was not like a one-off. That happened a number of years in the Big Ten in the early 80s, where some teams played 9 games and some played 8.
Crazy that it was still going on, because obviously it happened a lot in the first half of the 20th century and on into like the early 1960s. But I would have thought that the schedules were regulated and streamlined back then.
Now, the 2001 Ohio State UCLA had a bit of a certain vibe that is linked to a very historic day in our history. Can anyone come up with that? 2001 UCLA at the Rose Bowl defeated Ohio State 13-6. 2001, everyone. So those were the college football games, of course, played the Saturday after 9/11, which included UCLA at the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Did anything else come up, Matt, in your journey through USC and UCLA in the Big Ten?
Just a lot of fascinating historical nuggets. Here's one. Here's an interesting little fact. I mean, it's kind of random in terms of like the year, but like I picked the year 1968 because what happened that year? It was a pretty momentous year and a pretty momentous time in college football. So that was O.J. Simpson's Heisman season. It was Woody Hayes' last national championship season at Ohio State. It was the year before Bo Schembechler took over at Michigan. It was the middle of the McKay dynasty at USC. So I just arrived at 1968 as the year, and I wanted to compare like the long-term historical consistency of the elite programs that are going to be in the Big Ten, and with UCLA, carrying the Los Angeles market along with USC. So I decided to compare USC, UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan, and also another old-time Pac-12, Pac-10 power, Washington. Because Washington was good in the 1910s, in the World War I era, under a coach named Gil Doby. If you don't know him, look him up. He was an amazing coach, amazing track record at Washington in the very early part of the 20th century. So like Washington's been good at varying eras, over a longer period of time than say Oregon. I know Ducks fans are going to be angry at that, but like it's just reality. So I wanted to compare USC, UCLA, Washington, Ohio State, Michigan since 1968, and I measured them in terms of how many times they have failed to win 9 games in a season. All right. So like if you're winning 9 games, like you're setting the bar at a relatively high level, and keep in mind that we had only 11 regular season games through 2005 before adding 12 games. So like for a long time, 9 wins was a much higher benchmark than it is now because you were playing just 11. So how many times have these various powers failed to win 9 games in the seasons from 1968 onward? So Ohio State has the fewest, 13. Michigan, 19. So a pretty solid second. USC, 27. Ted Tollner, Paul Hackett, Lane Kiffin, and Clay Helton. Like they all took their toll. Also, some of the John Robinson Part 2 years as well. So USC had a few, like a rough decade and a half that caused 27 seasons with fewer than 9 wins. Washington, 39. UCLA, 38. So I was really surprised that Washington actually had one more sub-9 win season since 1968 than UCLA did. That was kind of surprising, but I realized upon researching this that Washington in the late 60s and early 70s, before Don James really got settled, like the Huskies were doing nothing back then. And then after Don James was forced out in the early 1990s, the Lambright, Gilbertson years, and then Neuheisel wasn't able to sustain it very long, and then of course Ty Willingham cratering, and then 7-win Sark. He didn't win 9 games on Montlake. Washington went through a lot of lean years, so it's just interesting to compare how many seasons without 9 wins those various schools on the West Coast and the heart of the Big Ten went with fewer than 9 games. And I haven't written about that at Trojans Wire, but just that's like we're dealing with like interesting historical nuggets with UCLA, USC, Michigan, Ohio State. That's another interesting set of nuggets for all of you here at the Voice of College Football.
The Ohio State number hit me a little high at first, but I just counted. They had 6 consecutive non-9-win seasons. Earl Bruce's final season, 6-4-1.
Yep.
John Cooper's first 5 years.
That's right.
They had a bad run of a lot of 8-4 type seasons there, 6 consecutive. But
it's still pretty astounding. It's still pretty astounding that Ohio State has failed to win 9 games in only 13 of the last 56 college football seasons. So actually 55, you're throwing out the pandemic. So just 13 out of 55. So like Ohio State's batting pretty much 800 at winning 9 games over 55 years. That's absolutely phenomenal.
I know, of course, this being a USC show, will focus on USC, and you guys can help us along with that by asking questions and so forth. But I'll throw this one out as another Ohio State consistency note. This is crazy to me. Since 2004, Ohio State's worst record in Big Ten play is 7-1.
God. Insane.
They've either been 7-1, 8-1, or undefeated every year since 2005 in the Big Ten.
Wait a minute. 2011.
Oh, I'm sorry. I bridged. I was going to take out the interim coach. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't,
so like
I
that,
didn't
you can
give
put
that
an
addendum.
asterisk on
You're
that
right.
one.
Yes, I
So
didn't.
Under Tresselmeyer Day,
yes,
7-1's the worst. Yeah.
Yes.
Still insane. Yeah.
All right, folks, we appreciate you being here, 100 strong on the line. If you have missed any part of the show, what you do is you just wait for us to conclude here and you catch what you missed. You can do that each and every week, and would love for you to be back here at 8 Pacific time next Monday.
And I'll just add, if you haven't watched the Anthony Munoz interview at Trojan Conquest Live with Tim and Rick, watch it and then share it, okay? That's what I'm asking of you here at the Voice of College Football.
These guys have also knocked out a couple call-in shows as well here recently. Tony, we thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much for that. Who's the third best program in the Big Ten all time? That's a great question. Well, it's obviously Penn State if you consider that all-time 30 seasons. They would have the best winning percentage, But if you're talking long-term historically, that's a great question because between Wisconsin was awful for a long time before Barry Alvarez.
Purely in terms of national titles,
It'd be
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yeah.
Bernie Bierman, baby.
Yes. But if we're talking about, it's really close between Iowa, Wisconsin. Probably those two would be in terms of consistently winning for a time. But yeah, Penn State during their time in the Big Ten. That's a great question, Tony. Great question. And Gixer Squid, any chance USC may modify their uniform and or helmet in anticipation of the Big Ten move? I remember reading about rumors early this last season.
I don't know, Gixer, but my big USC uniform thing is that when Notre Dame comes to the Coliseum in 2026, that's going to be the 100th anniversary of the start of the USC Notre Dame rivalry. I want Notre Dame in green, USC in red. Paint one of the end zones green at the Coliseum, one of the end zones cardinal and gold. I want that game to be a special color matchup. Let's have it. Let's have Christmas. USC red, Notre Dame green jerseys. That's the one thing I really want for USC uniforms in the near future. One other thing, while we're on the topic of uniforms, in researching that Dick Vermeil Super Bowl, Rose Bowl question, looked at, tried to find some photos from the 1976 Rose Bowl between USC and Ohio State. That was a double home uniform game. USC wearing its light blue. Ohio State wore the red. Oh, man. We need to have double home uniforms more in college football, certainly in the bowl games. Need to do more of that.
Now, that was before my time, but I've watched that game a number of times. And actually, I just skimmed through it just a few weeks ago. And that never crossed my mind that I was watching double home uniforms in that game. Just very odd that Ohio State was an enormous favorite and won by 3 touchdowns earlier in the season and were upset by UCLA to cost Woody Hayes a national championship.
And I realized, you can't do double home with USC and Ohio State because it's red on red, but USC, Michigan, Michigan dark blue and USC red. You can do that. Let's have it. Let's have it in the Coliseum next year when Harbaugh comes. And it's a night game, so Michigan won't be sweating in the daytime. That should be a late October, early November night game. Let's have Michigan wear the dark home jerseys. Let's bring some romance back. We can't have a 1985 world. Let's bring some romance back into college football.
Now, see, as we get ready to check out here, I would, I don't know if I should rile up the USC faithful by proclaiming what I believe to be the best looking uniforms in college football.
So this is some pretty big news from Tim Prangley here.
Come check out the Trojan Conquest call-in show Thursday night at 8. Is that 8 Pacific? We have a phone line in StreamYard. We will check out tweets, trivia, and recruiting. Fight on. I tell you,
Prangley giving you more of the USC content you crave here at the Voice of College Football. Tim's a maniac.
Can we clone Tim, Rick, and Tony about 16 times and throw them on the other channels? That would be phenomenal. They are upstaging me, and I love it. I welcome it. So, Tim, thank you so much for doing that. I believe that would be 8 Pacific time would be my guess, everyone. 8 Pacific time on Thursday. Actually, Tony Altamore and myself, it will not conflict time-wise. We'll be putting together another deep dive. We're looking at the Georgia athletic and academic program, a deep dive on Georgia coming up on Thursday night. All right, Matt, thank you. So,
just want to address this. I don't know. Maybe Penn State will white out USC when USC goes to Penn State in 2024. But just to be clear, everyone should be clear on this. That's going to be a Fox Big Noon Saturday game because that's the only big USC road trip in 2024. That's going to be Big Noon Saturday. You can take that to the bank. We're very confident about at Trojans Wire. We're very confident that's going to be a noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific start. Maybe Penn State whites out the early game, but usually the whiteout is reserved for a night game. So just get that on the record.
So Tim has clarified.
Tim, yep.
We've got a big game, or a big day, I should say, on Thursday. So again, we've got myself and Tony Altimore getting together on the main channel and the Georgia channel doing a deep dive on Georgia, and then Tim and the crew, Rick, at 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern with USC Trojan Conquest live call-in show. All right, Matt, thank you so much for everything that you do as well for us and making this show go every Monday night. We're building a great thing here at the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. And everyone, there are folks out there that don't know that we're doing this multiple times a week, and you're our best promoters. So let folks know that we are here Sunday and Monday, and this week on Thursday as well. Matt, thank you so much for everything that you do. Is there anything going on at Trojans Wire that you would like to let everyone know about?
Just like if you want information on Big Ten scheduling and also Big Ten history, Big Ten trivia, we're the place to be. Like you've gotten a taste of it tonight here at USC Trojans Live with Mark Rogers at the Voice of College Football. So you just sit down at the buffet table at Trojans Wire, and we're going to just be rolling out plenty more content. And of course, USC has a huge recruiting weekend coming up. We'll be on that. But like for the next few days before that huge recruiting weekend, just soak up the Big Ten scheduling information, the history, the trivia, all that fun stuff, and pass the word. And also, that new bonus segment that Mark and I are going to turn out, that and the other topics for the bonus segments when you visit our USC YouTube channel, like these are choice cuts. These are elite topics. Like we're not just going to give you, peanut butter sandwich. We're giving you the Chateaubriand. We're giving you the filet mignon on these choice cuts. You really want to watch them. And so you need to join at the medium or high membership tier. But we promise you, this is going to be worth your while to join up and get these choice cuts for our bonus segments here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football.
All right, everyone, back here Thursday at 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern with Rick and Tim, and you can call the show and talk USC football with them. Matt, thanks so much again.
Thank you.